Hey, what's up, YouTube? I want to make this video today going over how the pods work for the Mac and essentially a lot of what every other college football conference is doing nowadays, as well as essentially what conference would be the best fit financially and logistically for Northern Illinois. So first you have the pods. I think we all knew about this change, right? We knew it was discussed, it was put out there, right? They're not doing divisions anymore. For those who didn't know, it's probably been a surprise to a degree because, you know, if you go check ESPN or whatever website you check for standings, you'll notice the MAC doesn't have divisions, right? There's no MAC East, MAC West. And if you actually look across the college football horizon in general, I want to say you only really have maybe one football conference left that does divisions. I believe that is Sunbelt. So I would assume probably sooner rather than later, even they're going to switch from that. For the most part, there were two reasons why they do this. They've gotten away from divisions to get rid of monotony when it comes to the matchups and things like that. You know, essentially spicing things up a bit. It should help, essentially, in a way, help you preserve certain rivalries. Like, you can still actually do that. But yeah, it just changes it. So what I mean is, with a division setup, the way it works, or at least I believe the way it works, I'm pretty sure the way it works, NIU, formerly of the MAC West, you play 5 games, 5 division games. You played 8 conference games total, but 5 division games. Technically, what that should mean, what it technically should mean is if NIU wins their 5 division games, they could technically lose, the cross-conference games, and it could be like, well, they won their division, though. You know, like, this is the team that won the division. Now, I'm trying to remember how many times that's really happened. I think it actually has happened a few times where you had a team that won essentially the division with like a 5-3 conference record. I think it's happened a few times. But I feel like a lot of times you didn't see it that often. Like, typically what you would end up seeing is like, okay, the division champ will more than likely have won more than 5 conference games. So typically they might come out of conference play and end up, you know, they'll end up in the conference championship, maybe with 1 conference loss, maybe 2 at most. But typically, right, they'd have a dominant conference schedule, right? If you win all your conference games, I mean, that means you're 8-0, or at least you're for sure have 8 wins heading into the MAC championship. But like I said, I'm pretty sure there's been a few years where you might have a team that completely swept the conference. They went 8-0 in conference play. The team that they're going to go up against is not a team that went 8-0 in conference play. Actually, you know what? The perfect example of this might be, I want to say it's actually NIU. It's actually one of NIU's conference championships. There was a year where NIU did not have the most amazing record overall. Like, yeah. But I want to say we won just what we needed to win to actually make it into the conference championship. Now, the team we're playing against, I want to say we were playing against a Buffalo team that year that on paper, it shouldn't have been close. Like, they should have beaten us. It should not have been close. They had been, a pretty solid team that season. Here's us, the little engine that could. Nobody's expecting anything big from us. Yada, yada, yada. We make it to the MAC championship, and yeah, we beat them. So, yeah. Some people, I think that may be one of the examples of why people are like, should NIU have made it into that game and I'm pretty sure, I'm going to go back after this video and look at that season to see which teams were probably actually better than us. So it probably should have been Buffalo. And there was probably two other teams that technically by conference record had better records. But I think what it actually had came down to was our division record was what we needed it to be. I don't think we were 5-0 in the division unless we were. But I have to go back and check that. But that was a perfect example. It was literally a perfect example because I remember us going into, I was like, we made the wait, huh? Like I didn't even realize we had made the conference championship, but we did. So of course everybody was happy about that, And then we win the conference championship against a team that I think that Buffalo team only had like 1 or 2 losses that entire season. I don't even think they had, maybe one of those losses, maybe one of the losses was to a MAC school. Long story short, like I said, that Buffalo team was good. It was a solid Buffalo team. And yeah, they just, on that day, NIU did what NIU does, They won they won it. And you have to realize, like, you are playing a school that is experienced, is more experienced than most when it comes to playing in conference championships, when it comes to play, right? Yes, it's different rosters, different groups of players, even different coaches. But I actually want to say that year, that might have been, I want to say that was Rod Carey's. I think that was his last season. I think that was the last year Rod Carey was the head coach at NIU. And yeah, that team went and beat who they beat. So you get away from that because I'm pretty sure there's people who view that as like not fair. They're like, how the hell does NIU make it into this? They like scraped by. How are they in the conference championship when you have other teams that technically were better on paper when it comes to overall, I guess you can say, conference wins? So by changing to pods and getting rid of divisions, it comes down to the 2 best conference records. Simple as that. 2 best conference records. The best you could potentially do is if you lose a game and win everything else, if you go 7-1 in conference, unless 2 other teams some way, somehow go 8-0 in conference, 7-1, you could potentially make. It just all depends on the year, because you can have that year where this team beats that team, but then loses and then beats. Like it can just go back and forth. Like we saw that with NIU this season. Here's NIU, plays Western Illinois, beats Western Illinois, plays Notre Dame, beats Notre Dame, has a bye week, and then they come off of that, and then they play Buffalo at home. We're beating Buffalo. Let Buffalo come back and beat them. Let them take them to overtime and just, yeah. Shouldn't have happened, but it happened. It's in the history books. It's set in stone. Nothing you can do. So right now, NIU's 1-1. in the conference. We still got a whole 6 games to go. Destiny's in our own hands. They do 6 games to go. Buffalo's actually 2-0, I believe. And Buffalo beat Toledo pretty solid win. I might say it wasn't like a slim game. It wasn't a no. They beat Toledo, and Toledo typically, like I said, pretty sure going into this, Toledo favorite to win the whole thing. So yeah, they're checking that box for we're gonna spice things up a bit. We're gonna have teams, because this means a whole lot more than what it usually would. Buffalo is the number 1 team in the conference right now. As of right now, Buffalo, if the season ended, if we played one more game and everything ended and Buffalo wins that game, well, Buffalo's in the MAC championship. That's how it works, right? It's not about divisions or any of that. Matter of fact, Buffalo has played historically 2 teams that would not be in their division. They've played us, NIU, and Toledo. Right? They played NIU and Toledo. Buffalo, could there have been a season where both of us were scheduled and as a crossover conference? Yeah, sure. But we're not even historically, we're not in the division together. And they've beaten essentially 2 of the better MAC West teams. So yeah, right now Buffalo's the leader. And all you can hope and pray is Buffalo loses 2 games, NIU goes out and wins everything else, because then that will for sure get us into the MAC championship, right? Because like I said, it is purely based on best conference record. You're going to start to see conferences where it comes down to, that tiebreaker type of thing. And I would assume the way they do that, it's going to be usually they handle it with points or something like that. I'm pretty sure points for, points against, you do the math on it. And then that's how you figure out, well, who makes it in and who don't, whatever. Yeah. So long story short, we're going to take the 2 straight up best teams. That's the goal. Take the 2 best teams. Technically on paper, if NIU ends up in some sort of tiebreaker type of situation down the line, I would think we're in a better situation as of right now. Because defensively, our defense, they're not allowing a whole lot of points to be put up on the board. So defensively, people are getting held. It's the offensive part where it's we're also not putting up a bajillion points. So take that as you may. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And that's the whole point of it, is just interesting, right? You may have a year where, a team's in the MAC conference championship with 6 wins, right? Because let's say it was just that competitive in the conference. Everybody was losing to everybody, right? There was no clear cut, this team is just the most dominant team across the board. It came down to that team. They got 6 wins and 2 losses in the conference. And that's how they made it. So, we have the pods. So instead of divisions, we now have pods. The way the pods work, this is their way of kind of trying to preserve rivalries, essentially. What the pods ensure is that whoever's in your pod with you, you will for sure play that team over the next whatever seasons, right? I guess technically these pods are set in stone for the next 3 years. So this year, next year, and the year after. More than likely, you probably won't see a huge difference or shakeup with the pods. I don't envision it. But like I said, they're set in stone next 3 seasons, including this season, I believe. So there was a bit of like, I don't want to say confusion, maybe not anger, but some disappointment, some, like why are the pods the way they are? Well, the easiest pod to do, Eastern, Central, and Western Michigan. Let's just go ahead and get that one out the way. That was the easiest one. So those three are playing each other forever as they've been doing, right? That continues on. Next one, I want to say you have Akron, Kent State, and Buffalo. Well, Akron and Kent State, clearly, that's a rivalry. Buffalo's just kind of in the mix. And I want to say those two schools, I believe those are the two furthest East Ohio schools. So that's kind of how that's just who Buffalo is with, Once UMass is in the conference, I want to say more than likely UMass will be added to that pod. If all the teams if all the teams that are in the conference right now are still in the conference, then yeah, you just add UMass to that pod. And well, now you have a pod that's 4 and all the other pods are 3. If some changes happen, where this team leaves, maybe that team leaves, now is a different situation. Your conference just went from 13 to 11, or maybe it goes from 13 back down to 12. You might shift things a bit. It would be kind of interesting to see who ends up with who, because the thing is, you want UMass and Buffalo together, right? You want UMass and Buffalo together, but you also kind of want Kent State. And so I think, like, if, long story short, if things change, then they'll just kind of change the way these pods work. Instead of 4 pods of 3, it'll become 3 pods of 4. And honestly, that might work better anyway. But yeah, you have the Akron, Kent State, Buffalo pod. Then this is where things get interesting, because I'm like, as an NIU fan, I'm like, what the hell? You have the Ohio, Miami, and Ball State pod. Now, if you're an NIU fan, like I said, you're like, 2 of our rivals are right there. How did we not end up in that pod with Miami and Ball State? Well, here's why. Miami and Ohio, that's a rivalry that's been there since forever. So they're not splitting them up. And then Ball State in Miami. I didn't even know that this was a rivalry. I didn't know. Ball State and Miami have a Redbird rivalry. So apparently that's a rivalry that has been, I want to say in 2017, that was legitimized by the conference. Apparently, supposedly, it's been a rivalry that's been going for a long time, but it wasn't until recently where it was like officially set in stone. So that's why those 3 end up together. Really, what you're telling me is Miami, Ohio, they get to have both of their rivalries. That's what that's what you're telling me. They get to have both of their rivalries. Seeing that Ohio's rivalry, like I said, their rival is Miami, Ohio, but then it's also Marshall, who's not in the conference. The last pod is NIU, Bowling Green, and Toledo. Now, then also as an NIU fan, you're like, you know what, I can live with that one, because we have our pseudo rivalry or whatever with Toledo. Now, the thing is, in more recent years, I think more people have come to the reality where, like, does Toledo really view us as rivals? Is it more that we hate Toledo more than they hate us? Because the rivalry between Toledo and Bowling Green, that's a rivalry, right? We're talking about 2 schools that are no more than 30 minutes away from each other, right? That's a rivalry. Right, so putting them together makes sense. And then you can essentially say NIU and Toledo works because historically over these last whatever years, NIU does not like Toledo. But like I said, has that hatred truly been thrown the other way? That's the thing. Does Toledo have that same level of hate for NIU? The NIU throws it. Like, the Toledo game is the game that's for sure circled every year, right? Ball State circled as well, but the Toledo game, a lot of seasons has huge implications because typically whoever wins that NIU versus Toledo game, a lot of times is going to be the team that probably goes on to make it to the conference championship. So unless both of these schools are just having off years and we're the last games of the season versus each other and the MAC championship is already out the window, like neither one of us is making it, then yeah, that's different. But a lot of times I want to say we end up running into each other either kind of early-ish or midway through the conference schedule. So it's kind of like, let's say NIU is 3-0 leading up to that game, Toledo's 3-0 leading up to that game, or Toledo's 2-1, and they're like, yeah, we need to bump NIU off, you know? That typically is a game. So in this case, it's kind of that. It's pretty much that situation, right? NIU is 2-1. Toledo, I think they're 2-1. No, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the conference game. NIU's 1-1. Toledo, I believe, is 1-1. I would think that this was not their first conference game. But like I said, they lost to Buffalo. Buffalo's 2-0. So we're living in a world right now where it's like this Buffalo team, they're picking up steam. There's a lot of confidence. Buffalo might mess around and run the table and win the whole thing. Or at least make it to the MAC championship, right? Once you're there, it's a different story. I've seen plenty of years where NIU, hands down, was the best team in the conference, and then we make it to the MAC championship and lose. So it just all depends. It all depends. Sometimes it just like, it all depends. It comes down to who's the best team that day. That's what it is every week, is who's the best team that day. So yeah, like that's how the pods work. That's how the schedule works. It's not about divisions anymore, because when it was about divisions, it was you versus 5 other schools. Now that it's not about divisions, it's you versus 11 other schools fighting for 2 spots. So there's a huge difference in how each game, you get what I'm saying? Like the value of each game. Each game is just super serious now. I'm not saying that when divisions were there, that the crossover games meant nothing. No. I'm not saying that, because you want the best record possible. You want to win out, right? If I'm looking at this, a 10-2 NIU by the end of the season could be ranked. Like that could be a ranked team. What could stop it is the fact that we lost to Buffalo. Us losing to North Carolina State does not hurt as much as losing to Buffalo. If they don't lose to Buffalo, then things may go a little different. Like if we lost to Notre Dame and we lost to NC State, but we ran the table, beat everybody else, we're 10-2 by the end of the year, depending on how the dominoes fall, maybe NIU's ranked like 25 or something, you know. Who knows? But because NIU was ranked at one point, I don't know. But I don't know. Maybe NIU could creep back into the rankings by the end of the season. It could happen. It probably won't. Who knows? It's very, very interesting. And I kind of like it. You know, let's look at the college. Like, let's get out of the MAC and look at other conferences. Big Ten's doing the pods, and I would think the Big Ten pods may be 4-team pods. I'm thinking they might be doing 4 teams because the Big Ten's pretty damn big. And the reason why I say you do 4-team pods is because by making that deal, you are ensuring that those West Coast teams you just added to your conference are playing each other. That would be the reason why you do the 14 pods. So that way USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington in a season will all still play each other. But then you're also going to play, for sure, 4 traditional Big Ten teams, right? We just seen Oregon and Ohio State, right? We're seeing these matchups every day. We just saw Iowa and Washington. So you're still seeing these interesting matchups that you probably would have never seen unless it was like a bowl game, right? Like, you don't see these teams play each other often at all. Like, literally, you do not see Oregon and Ohio State play each other unless it's a bowl game. In today's world, the college football playoff, like, you're seeing things that you would not typically see. And I know for a fact the viewership of that Ohio State and Oregon game, hands down, like, that had to have, especially with how it ended, that was millions. That had to have been the highest rated, highest viewed game. I know there was also the Alabama and South Carolina game, I believe. And Alabama was on upset alert again. But like I said, Alabama, who has already lost, who's been upset, right? They're on upset alert again. Or do I want to watch the number 2 versus number 3 teams in the nation essentially have a college football playoff game pretty early season? If you think about it, like, this is a college football playoff game at the midpoint of the season. Yeah, I'm watching that. I'm turning that on. So, like I said, it allows for some spicy games, and it works very well the more teams you have. So, like I said, if you're the Big 12 right now, who kind of has a surplus of schools, you're the Big 10, who has definitely a surplus of schools. Even the SEC, AAC, basically all the power conferences, if you notice, they clearly have more than 12 schools. Doing those pods and ensuring that, okay, these schools will still play each other, and then you do whatever other scheduling you're going to do. So it's like, this school will play this school, on this given year. It works out. It works out. I know with, for instance, the ACC, right, you got Duke and you got North Carolina. But then you also have NC State and you got Wake Forest. You're creating essentially a pod where you're probably just putting those 4 together. Those are all your North Carolina schools. You're going to keep them all together. They're going to play each other for sure every year. You're keeping the in-state rivalry there. If I'm looking at the Big Ten pods, like I said, you're keeping all those West Coast teams together. You're probably creating a pod that is for sure Michigan, Ohio State, because you want to make sure that rivalry continues for the end of time. So wherever Michigan is, Ohio State is in the pod too. And all these things, you can go look them up, right? The conferences, they have these things out there. So you know who's together. And if you know who's together, then you know at some point in the season, those 2 teams are going to play each other. I'm pretty sure Illinois and Northwestern are in a pod together, so it's just like, well, here's Illinois and Northwestern. Who else are they together with? For all I know, because I know Illinois just played Purdue. That game went to overtime. It was a nail biter. It shouldn't have been that close. Illinois literally let Purdue come back. I would assume like that's a pod, right? Because that's a rivalry game But then again, maybe it's not a pod. Who knows, right? You can go look these things up. You can go look them up. But it gives you the chance and the opportunity to group some schools together, to preserve rivalries, but also geographically, right? That's the other thing I wanted to mention. It's also a geographic thing. That was the other reason why I was like, why is NIU not with Ball State at least? Because if we're doing geographically, that would kind of be the next closest school. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Ball State is further away than what Toledo is. I don't feel like doing the math or Google mapping that right now, but it is what it is. But I would think, in a conference like the Big Ten, you're going to have Maryland, Rutgers, probably Penn State, and who else? Who else are you going to have with those three? Maryland, Rutgers, Penn State. I'm not sure. But like I said, this is a Google search. That's all it takes is a Google search to find out who's in that pod. Like, what are the schools that are together over there? Yeah. It's fun. It's fun. It's fun. It's pretty solid. It works. It works. And you get to see some matchups you probably wouldn't typically see. Yeah. So, all right, we're 30 minutes in. Let's transition to the next topic of the day. Which conference geographically, logistically, financially makes the most sense for NIU? Let's start with geographically. Let's get that one out the way. Geographically, or no, let's go back a little bit. So you would think that I'm just gonna mention 2 conferences, but I'm gonna mention 4. The first one being the MAC, because that's where we are. Second being the Mountain West. Third being the Pacific Athletic Conference, and the fourth being the American Athletic Conference. We're not mentioning any power conferences or anything like that because that's not going to happen. If NIU were 6-0 and ranked right now, that might be a little bit different. If NIU was 6-0 ranked and they looked like an unstoppable machine, different story. Maybe, just maybe, you could potentially look at the Big 12 to add one more. Potentially. But because we're not 6-0 and ranked right now, that's a pipe dream. But the main thing I want to say is, like I said, MAC, Mountain West, PAC, AAC. So, let's do geographically. Geographically, the MAC clearly is a perfect fit. And that's typically what most NIU fans, they're going to point out, right? We are where we're supposed to be. Right? We can bus to every school that we're playing against. We don't have to take a flight. We can literally bus to these schools. Mid-American Conference, we essentially are in Middle America. This is where we've been the last 20 plus years, so it works. Yeah, I mean, it just does. Like, it really does at the end of the day. Some people may think, oh, I hate the MAC, this, that, the other. I don't hate the MAC. I hate the lack of money the MAC has. And that's what people may think makes it seem like I hate the MAC. I hate the fact that the MAC probably will never get paid what it's owed, because you can't tell me that ESPN does not benefit greatly off of the MAC. And I'm gonna be straight up. The MAC in general, like the MAC, like Sunbelt Conference USA, they haven't been able to do this. Even the AAC, they haven't been able to do this. It is the MAC that has a literal phrase for their games. That's called branding. The MAC has Maction. You don't have that with the Sun Belt. You don't have that with Conference USA. You don't have that with the American Conference. The MAC is, here's the funny part. The MAC is America's conference. And I'll say that, honestly, the MAC is America's conference. And the reason why I say that, it is a blue-collar conference. It's a blue-collar conference, right? It's just the working man. You know, it's that state school you go to where it's like, it's not the big state school, right? It's the smaller state school, but you still get that fun college experience. You make those memories, right? That's what the MAC is comprised of. Smaller, medium-sized state schools. You can get you a solid education, get you a degree, and go on to make some good money. You know, it's kind of literally like, this is the American dream, right? That's what you're getting going to a MAC school. Very solid schools, but they just don't have the big name notoriety as other schools. But like I said, purely talking about from the sports POV, specifically football, the MAC has Maction. And Maction was born just about, just over 10 years ago now. So I want to say over 10 years or so ago, right? So maybe 10, 15 years ago. You have Maction. And Maction has been a term that has stuck ever since then. Maction is what you get when you get these Mid-American Conference games, and they're putting up hella points back to back to back to back, right? The game is coming down to the last minute, right? I want to say you could essentially say there was a Maction game the other day. I want to say it might have been, it wasn't the Toledo Buffalo game, and it definitely wasn't the NIU Bowling Green game. I want to say either Ball State or somebody was in essentially a Maction-esque game, right? This team put up 30-something points. This team put up 30-something points. It pretty much came down to the wire. It came down to whatever happened in that last minute, I'm pretty sure. That's Maction, right? MAC has historically, we have these games where dudes are running off they're running back kickoff returns, they're running back punts. Teams are just scoring. Just high-scoring offenses, right? It's almost like defense does not exist. Offenses are just scoring at will, right? We're talking about final score 63-60 type of games. So you have Maction, but that has created a brand. That actually has created some level of viewership on a national stage. I'm not saying everybody named Mama is turning out to watch MAC games. They're not. They're not. Matter of fact, they're probably doing it less than what they have in the past, thanks to good old ESPN. But Maction. We have what we have, and we haven't been paid for it. I don't know. You can't blame ESPN because on their end, they made a great deal. It's the MAC's end that it was a horrible deal. On ESPN's end, they're licking their chops. They're rubbing their hands together. We got them. We got them. NIU has... Not NIU, but the MAC has been locked into their media rights deal literally for 20-something years. And halfway through those 20 years, they kind of renegotiated a higher pay. So at one point in the beginning of the deal, They definitely weren't even making what they were making. And then halfway through the deal, they were like, yo, we should be making, okay, can we work on something? We need to be making a bit more. Like, let's figure this out. Let's look at the landscape of things. We should be making a bit more money. Now we look at this where it's like, yeah, that deal ain't expiring until 2027. I want to go back and look up when the deal began. I don't know if it started in 2007. I feel like it was even before that. I want to say it was before that. It was a lengthy deal, which is kind of insane. And I hope to God the MAC never does that again. But like I said, now they've created a situation where things aren't in their favor. So let me continue on. Let me get back on topic. But things are not in the MAC's favor at this point. Like I said, geographically, the MAC, perfect. Perfect fit for NIU. Mountain West. The Mountain West NIU would have to charter flights. Simple as that. They would have to charter flights. Not only charter flights, but, of course, we got to get everything trucked across the western half of the country. But it would only be 4 flights you have to charter, because if NIU joins the Mountain West, it is a football-only member, meaning all our other sports would not be chartered. Here's the goal to me. If you can find a way, because I don't think it's completely impossible. I think it is actually possible that NIU could stay in the MAC for the rest of their sports. The likelihood is looking low, but I do think NIU could stay in the MAC for the rest of their sports. And the reason why I say that, it may be slightly, okay, when you really think about it, you gotta think about this. Because the MAC is adding UMass, you're at 13 full sports members. If you lose NIU for football only, then you still at least have 12 football members instead of 13. And then you have 13 members for everything else. So it may still be beneficial to keep NIU in the MAC. The MAC could be salty, and they could be like, nah, we want no parts, which would be understandable. It could, it's understandable. I get it, right? Either you're with us or you ain't. But it could be possible to actually keep NIU in the MAC, for all the other sports they're in, except for football. If I'm NIU, I would, if here's my thing. If I'm NIU and if I leave the conference for football only, potentially maybe I strike some deal with the MAC. And I'm like, how about this? We can get home and away games for, from now for the next however many, whatever years, to maintain the relationship with the MAC. So like I said, NIU has 4 non-conference games. I am not saying that we use all our non-conference games on playing MAC schools. If we left for football, yeah, we're gonna have 4 MAC teams that we're gonna schedule. That hurts NIU in the long run, right? Strength of schedule is what's gonna happen. But if you're like, we can have a home and away with Ball State and Miami, Ohio, or Ball State and Toledo, whoever, for the next, let's say 20 years, we can sign that contract. We can keep that going. you know, maybe that's something you do in good faith, you know, and you keep those things together, right? Maybe you even pay those schools for that. Who knows? I mean, you're not paying them no million something. Maybe you're paying them $100K, something like that, to come play that game, right? Maybe you're paying them that $100K to play that game. Whenever it's an away game, right? So whenever they have to come to DeKalb, right, you're paying them $100K. Like I just said, this is a 10-year thing, no, 20-year thing. So that means 10 of those games are going to be home, 10 of them are going to be away. You're paying them 100. So over the span of those 20 years, each school could potentially be making $1 million, and that wouldn't be bad. That wouldn't be bad at all to me. So maybe that's what you do to keep the other sports in the MAC. You know, you work out something, right? You're like, okay, NIU, we've been here. We've advocated for the conference hands down. But it's like, you know, it's an opportunity. Like I said, the MAC could be like, nah, F that, y'all got to go. So like I said, geographically, well, I guess more geographically, because I kind of gave y'all a logistical answer, but geographically, as of right now, NIU is not, technically, I'm just, you know, going by the rules. Geographically, NIU is not a fit in the Mountain West. As of right now, the members that are in it, we would be the furthest east school that they would have. Because technically, as of right now, if we're looking at full membership, or not looking at full membership, but looking at the members they have, at least from the football aspect, you have UTEP in Hawaii, San Jose State, Wyoming, UNLV, Nevada, New Mexico, and who am I missing? Air Force. Yeah. I want to say all 8 of those schools are either in the Mountain Time Zone or Pacific Time Zone. In Hawaii, I don't even know if Hawaii is Pacific. Is Hawaii still Pacific Time Zone? We know they're in the Pacific Ocean. I don't even know if they're in the Pacific Time Zone. They might be in a whole nother, you get what I'm saying? So geographically, I feel like if I'm the Mountain West, NIU, in all honesty, should be the furthest east I'm even looking to go. Now, I know also Toledo was a part of that, right? When it was brought that Mountain West had interest in NIU and Toledo. But geographically speaking, like, to me, NIU is probably the furthest east I should really be looking. So other than that, geographically, no. For the PAC, same exact thing, same exact answer. Geographically, NIU does not fit. That would be the furthest east school that they would have, right? The AAC, NIU fits. NIU fits in this sense. We would be, I want to say, one of the furthest west. I want to say the other school that's pretty much, I want to say in our time zone, in the same time zone as NIU. I want to say North Texas. I want to believe North Texas, as well as as well as Rice. So North Texas and Rice, I want to say they're both in that central time zone part of Texas. So if you line things up where NIU is and you go straight down, I would think that North Texas is probably somewhere around that same, you know. So let me not even say that we're the furthest west AAC school. Memphis is not super far. technically, when you like look at where we are, right? You got UTSA. That's another school. So San Antonio. Tulane. So right now, geographically speaking, so the best fit is the MAC. Geographically speaking, I guess technically the AAC also is a no, but it's like it's better than the Mountain West and is better than the PAC for sure. Like, could I bus, right? Could our team hop into a bus and go play Memphis? Yeah, easy. Could they hop into a bus, go play Army? Yeah, sure. Could they hop in a bus, go play Navy? Yeah, sure. Could they bus to these places? The answer is yes. It's different once it starts to turn into, yeah, let's hop into a bus and go play Southern Florida. Let's hop into a bus and go play Rice. Let's hop in a bus and go play, because those distances are a bit farther. So that's why I'm like, geographically, Tennessee is kind of like, do you consider Tennessee the Midwest or do you consider Tennessee the South? I think a lot of people would say Tennessee is the South. So, I mean, they don't have any other true Midwest school. So that's where it's like, I guess geographically, yeah, we're not actually geographically, geographically, no. Historically, I mean, they had Cincinnati at one point. Yeah. So they've been in the Midwest, right? Not Illinois or Ohio or Michigan or anything. Well, no, they were in Ohio, but not like Illinois or Michigan or anything like that. Or Iowa or, but they were in essentially the Midwest. They were in Cincinnati. So geographically, the MAC is the best fit, right? So the MAC wins that one. Logistically, here's the funny part. I would actually say logistically, the MAC, no. And this is why I say this. If I'm talking about a time thing, if I'm talking about getting there quickest time possible, logistics-wise, whether it be bus or flight, because the schools we're going against are so close, well, the odds and likelihood of NIU flying to these schools is super low. And because of that, you're busing. Those bus rides are still pretty decently long. So, yeah. Logistically, technically, on paper, I mean, clearly, yes, being in the MAC works. But it's like, you're not going to fly to Ball State. You're not flying to Eastern, Central, Western Michigan. You're not, right? So our kids they're hopping in a bus. And that's a nice long bus ride. And I'm sure it's real nice and irritating. Not super comfortable, But that's what they're doing. They're in a bus for hours on end. And then they're competing. Logistically, okay, I got to throw in another rule. So geographically, that was one thing. We're going to put logistics and financial. So logistics is going to cross over into financial a bit. If the MAC had more money from their media rights deals and it was paying the schools millions of dollars, like let's say these schools were getting $4 million payouts every year, flying would be a non-issue. Flying would be an absolute non-issue for the MAC schools. They could fly to each other like it wasn't nothing, right? Maybe not Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan, and Western Michigan, You're going to be in the air for like 10 minutes, like 30 minutes. Like, not even that, I don't think. Like, but flying would be a non-issue if you got the money. We don't got the money. That's the problem. Whereas, like I said, logistically, I've sat there and done that math. I've literally sat and did the math already on if NIU played San Jose State, Wyoming, UNLV, and Nevada Reno away games in the Mountain West. If you know the payout is gonna be $4 million, you can afford those flights. I promise you, NIU can afford they can charter those flights. They can afford them. Now, of course, you also have to ship your equipment and all that stuff. So even then, they can afford it. They would be able to do things within their budget that typically, historically, they're not able to do. It would eat up their budget or eat into the monies that they got coming in trying to fly currently on what we have. If you're in the Mountain West, and like I said, you're getting a $4 million payout every year, flying is a non-issue. We're talking about round trip at that. They would be able to do it. It would be doable. I've done that research. I looked at it, would be doable. So logistically, that's a 4-hour flight from, and I've actually seen it. Like, I know for a fact, NIU, DeKalb, the little airport in DeKalb, they can fly a plane into DeKalb, but one that can fly the team, right? If you remember the Orange Bowl game, there was a big old plane that the players hopped on in DeKalb, Illinois, and flew down to Florida to play in the Orange Bowl. So we know that is possible and doable. You take that plane and go fly to UNLV. That's a 4-hour flight, I want to say. I want to say it was straight up 4 hours. Same thing with Reno. I want to say it was 4.5 hours, I believe, to Wyoming. Same thing to San Jose. And then there's a travel stipend whenever you go play Hawaii. So, like, Hawaii knows, like, yeah, we're way out there. So, but Hawaii gives you money to come out there. So it works out. Yeah. They would be able to do it logistically. You'd get your teams out there in 4 hours. Because you can't do that in the MAC, it would be beautiful if we could fly the teams around in the MAC. Because we'd get there so quick. And we can get back so quick. Time is of the essence. Right? Time is of the essence. Us busing the team to San Jose State? No. I want to say that's a whole day versus a 4-hour flight there. You go there, you compete, play the game, and then we go back home. That's 8 hours. 8 hours, or 9 hours technically. There and back. 9 hours total. That's what it would be. That's what it would be. Oh, we're playing UTEP. We're hopping on a flight straight south. I don't know if that'll be 4 hours. Maybe it'll be a little bit quicker. It might be 4 hours or 3.5. Who knows? Right, straight shot. We're gonna go play Air Force. We're going to Colorado. Colorado, I want to say that that's the closest school to us is Air Force. I want to say that that's the closest school to NIU. So that wouldn't even be a 4-hour flight. That would be more like 3. I'm pretty sure it'd be more like 3, maybe 3.5. For all I know, maybe 2.5. Right? But it would be a quicker flight. Very doable. And we'd have the money to do it. That's what people need to understand. So you have to, in this case, logistically also look at the money. the financial part. Logistically, Mountain West works. It'd be the exact same for the PAC. It'd be the exact same for the PAC. If it takes 4.5 hours to get to San Jose State, then we could assume it's going to take 4.5 hours to get to Fresno State. It's going to take, okay, maybe a little bit more than 4.5 hours to get to San Diego State, because we're going to the exact bottom, so maybe 5 hours. Boise State, that's probably 4.5 hours. Oregon State, right? 5 hours. It's doable. You are chartering flights, and you would have the money to do it. It would be a non-issue. It would be a non-issue. The team that works, the conference that works even the best for is the AAC, because you're chartering flights. Your furthest flight from DeKalb would be to South Florida. DeKalb to South Florida would be the furthest flight. Other than that, okay, DeKalb is going to go play Army. That is literally from DeKalb, or technically, I guess you would say Chicago, right? From Chicago to New York, 2-hour flight. Oh, we're going to go play Navy. Here's the funny part. That's an even shorter flight. That's not even as long of a flight. I want to say that flight was shorter than a flight to New York. To Annapolis, Maryland, I want to say that's an 1.5-hour flight from Chicago. I'm pretty sure a flight from Chicago to Memphis, that might be the shortest of all these flights. That's right there. Like, that's pretty dang close. We'd be there quick and back. Now, of course, I'm saying I'm listing off schools and teams that probably won't even be in the conference. Like, I'm talking about us playing Memphis and USF, and right, those schools will probably be gone if NIU ended up in that conference. Like, Memphis for sure is gonna be gone, so we wouldn't be playing Memphis. But yeah, so logistically, chartering those flights combined with the amount of money it would be doable. So logistically, I guess technically every conference gets a check mark. It works for everybody. But you have to look at it realistically. Like, we're not going to bus from DeKalb to San Jose State, from DeKalb to Wyoming. They're not doing that. They're going to fly. And at that point, if they're in that conference, they should have some millions coming in. And if you got those millions coming in, you are putting a little chunk of that toward chartering those flights. The last one, financially. This is the biggest one. Financially, this is where the MAC is a no. So up to this point, geographically, logistically, the MAC works. Financially, the MAC is a no. Sadly, I believe that in 2027, when the MAC deal is up and they go to, work out a new deal, I don't see them getting anything that is worth NIU staying. It would take some top tier negotiating to get NIU a $4 million per school per year payout. So like I said, I do not envision anything crazy happening. I think people are already estimating. They're saying the MAC will probably get $2.5 million per school per year. Yes, is that some money? Yeah. But the thing is, look at the landscape. Look at everybody else. Everybody else is making more. What the MAC would be making is the equivalent to what Sunbelt makes right now. Let that sink in. the MAC would be just now making what the Sun Belt makes. We should technically be making more than what the Sun Belt makes. So that's why I'm like, whatever the deal is, hey, it needs to not be no 10, 20, 30-year fucking deal ever again. The MAC should be like, we're looking for 6 years. 6 years. And we want to be able to pay our schools this much. We have a brand. We have teams that are competitive, that show well on a national level, right? Look at what the MAC did. Look at what our schools did, right? You had NIU beat Notre Dame. You had Toledo go and beat the hell out of Mississippi State, right? Our schools, they compete, they play. We should be making more. We want to build our damn schools. We want to build our programs. We cannot do that with the pennies on the dollar that y'all have been giving us for these years. That's what should be happening. The MAC should be like, 6-year contract, we want $4 million. The MAC should basically be like, we want what the Mountain West had. And you see the Mountain West right now. We have been consistent. We have been together for 20 plus something years. Consistent. We should be getting $4 million a year. Shit, make it $5 million a year. $5 million a year over the next 6 years. That will give your schools $30 million. $30 million. $30 million that they've never seen ever. Right? You have to realize, if MAC schools have only been getting about $8K each year for the last 10-something years, that's not even a whole million. That means every 2 years they're basically at 1.6. They're at 1.6. So you can say every 4 years they're at 3.2. 8 years, right? They're at 6.4. The amount of time it's taking them to accumulate money is gross. Versus, let's get a 6-year deal. I want some way, somehow, 6-year deal, $5 million per school per year payout. Right? Let's up the production. Let's up the value. You just went from, it would have taken you hella years. Hella years. Like, here's simple math. If we're getting 800,000 a year, very simple math, that means it's going to take 10 years to get to 8 million. Right? Very simple math. 800K a year, it takes 10 years to get to 8 million. That means it would have took 20 years to get to 16 million. It would take 100 years. Simple math, 100 years. 100 years to get to $80 million. There are conferences that will hit $80 million in like 3-4 years. Let that sink in. 100 years for a MAC school, if we stayed on this current deal we're locked into, if that's just what it was, it would take 100 years to hit $80 million. Whereas you have Big 12 teams that will hit $75 million in 3 years. Now you understand, people should understand where the frustration comes from, where the anger comes from, because our schools, we're getting left in the dust. I'm not even talking about the whole NIL and this, that, the other. Upgrades, updates, right? NIU fans will tell you they'll be the first ones to tell you, we need the damn stadium renovated. Our stuff is trash. I'm not even just talking about, oh, well, yeah, we need to add this so we can add more seats. I'm not even worried about that right now. We need to make general fixes and changes to the stadium itself. That's not going to happen at the rate we're going. You want players to come and play for this school? Go check out what does Ohio State athletics have? What does Michigan athletics have? You don't even have to aim that high. Let's be honest. You don't even have to aim that high. Go look and see, what does Central Florida have? What does, even Memphis have? What does Cincinnati have? What are they doing? How are they growing? How did they grow their programs? That's what you should look at. Yeah, don't shoot straight for the top. Because the things Ohio State has, Oregon has, Michigan has, Alabama has, it would be a bajillion years at the current pace before we can even come close to that stuff. So that's why I'm like, nah. Let's look at the schools that have taken the steps to make it to where they are and start to try to emulate that. See what we can do. How much does that cost? How do we get there? Right? That's what you need to do. The money matters. And the MAC don't got it. So financially, no. And like I said, I don't see them getting a deal good enough. Move on to the Mountain West. Mountain West is a very interesting place. And here's my thing. I'm hoping and praying and pulling for the Mountain West to add other FBS schools. I'm not against the FCS, but it would be you got to be very strategic. The Mountain West is in a rough spot. They're in a rough spot, thanks to the PAC. They're in a rough spot. The Mountain West has to be extremely strategic because they're trying to make up for what they lost. The Mountain West might be in a situation where, guess what? You lost 5 schools. You need more than 5 schools, right? You got to kind of do the AAC model. The AAC lost Cincinnati and UCF, right? Cincinnati and UCF. What did they turn around and do? They added 4 schools. They lost 2. They added 4. It wasn't we lose 2 and let's just replace those 2. No, they kind of had to, right? Because the 2 they lost were huge for them at the moment, right? You had UCF that was dominating people. You had Cincinnati, who was also if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure, didn't Cincinnati make it to the college football playoff? Or am I confusing them with somebody else? But Cincinnati at one point, I don't know, did they make it to the CFP? Regardless, Cincinnati had a couple of years where they were like legit. And UCF had those seasons where it's like, they were like, yo, we're straight undefeated. We're declaring ourselves national champions. F y'all, right? But those were 2 legit schools, 2 legit seasons, multiple seasons. It wasn't just one season, but multiple very good competitive seasons. And that's how they were able to make that transition to the Big 12. It's that simple. But if you watch what the AAC did, they lost those 2 and added 4. They lost the 2, added 4. If you look at what was going on with the Big 12, though, well, the Big 12 lost their 2 big names, right? They lost their 2 big names, and they're like, yeah, Cincinnati and UCF ain't going to make up for the loss of Texas and Oklahoma. So for them, it was a no-brainer, right? Because the Big 12 had added, what was it? They added Cincinnati, UCF, BYU. I feel like I'm missing a school. I feel like I'm missing somebody. I just can't think of who. And Houston, my bad, Houston. So the AAC actually lost. No, they lost a few damn schools. They lost Cincinnati, Houston, UCF. So instead of just replacing those three, they had to overcompensate. You get what I'm saying? Like, they had to add kind of as many schools as they kind of could. So it wasn't just, well, we lost these three, we need to add three. They kind of lost those three and they had to overcompensate. Same thing with the Big 12. Well, you had the schools you had coming in. You had 4 schools coming in. You had BYU, UCF, Houston, and Cincinnati. Right? You're trying to strengthen the conference, strengthen this, strengthen that. Texas and Oklahoma, they're like, nah. They're like, we want to get paid more. I want to say they were in the same situation as kind of the PAC, where it was like, media rights deal this, the money this, the network this. And yeah, those two brands, those two schools, they're like, we know who we are. And the money ain't moneying enough, so we're gonna bounce. And yeah, they left and went to the SEC, where they're definitely making bank. Like, they're making money. But you lose those two, even though you just brought in 4. It was a no-brainer for them. It was an absolute no-brainer for the Big 12 to be like, we just lost 2 of the biggest fucking schools that we possibly could have had. Like, so when the opportunity came to add Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado, it was literally a no-brainer. So you have to understand, when you're losing schools, especially when they're your best schools, your better schools, you have to kind of overcompensate to make up for the loss. So Mountain West is in an interesting position because it's like, they just lost 5 schools. I'm not saying that the Mountain West now goes out and adds 10 schools to make up for the 5 they lost, but they lost 5. Right? They lost 5. They were at 12. They were at 12. 11 of those 12 were full members, right? Hawaii has been just football only for years now. You lost 5 of your full sports members, right? So now we see they only have who they have, right? They went and added UTEP, so now they're at 7 full members. They're trying to see if Hawaii can be made a full member so they can get back to 8. But like I said, Mountain West is in no different of a situation than every other conference. You're now having to essentially overcompensate to make up for what you lost. You now have to overcompensate to make up for what you lost. And that's how it works when you're not the top of the top, right? There's really, in reality, there's 2 kings of the hill. It's SEC and the Big Ten. The SEC and the Big Ten basically control all of college football because those are the 2 conferences where it's like, we make the most money. So we get to sit at the top. The ACC isn't necessarily safe. They aren't. The ACC is not necessarily safe. The only thing keeping the ACC together, if I remember correctly, is the whole grant of rights thing. It's the whole grant of rights situation. And for those who don't understand how grant of rights works, it's more than just the media deal. It's actually that, but then let's like exponentially blow that up even more. So the way the grant of rights deal works, if I remember correctly, so somebody please correct me if I'm wrong. Let's say you have a 10-year media rights deal. You have a 10-year media rights deal that pays out $5 million a year. 5 years into that deal, you want to leave and join another conference. So year 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, right? you would no longer be there. Like, they were expecting you to be a school that's there for the full term of the deal, this, that, the other. Like I said, $5 million per year per school. Well, the way the grant of rights works, it's almost like the reverse Uno card. Like I said, if I'm saying this correctly, if your team leaves, if your school leaves, you would now owe the conference $5 million times however many years were left. That's how that works. So you would owe the conference $25 million just for the grant of rights. I don't even think that's like, oh, that, and that's it. It would be that. Plus, I'm pretty sure there's still an exit fee you got to pay. So who knows how much that is, right? Every conference has their different number. That is the biggest reason why, like, if like I said, if I communicated it properly, that's the biggest reason why you have the whole thing with, Florida State, Clemson, yada, yada, yada. Because they have whatever deal they have, which I'm pretty sure is also with ESPN. They have whatever deal they have, and then they also have the grant of rights agreement, I'm pretty sure, that goes along with it. And it's like, well, our deal doesn't expire until da 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 da. And right now, we're getting a payout of however many millions of dollars. And yeah, you would have to owe us that number times that number of years left in the contract. And Florida State and them, they're like, hell no, we finna sue our way up out of this because that's some bullshit. So, yeah, they ain't going nowhere. They ain't going nowhere. That's a quick way to lock somebody in. It's a quick way to lock somebody in. Because it's like, we see the landscape. We know teams are just bouncing and running and going and doing as they please. So here's potentially some sort of safeguard is by putting that in there. So now you can't just up and go. Now, I don't know what the deal is for Stanford and Cal and SMU because they came in not as schools that originally signed on that. So I wonder if it's a little bit different for them. But yeah, that's what's going on. Like, by Florida State, and I think it was Clemson or maybe it was Miami, whoever the hell it is, but Florida State for sure. That's the reason why they can't just up and go. That's the reason why stuff kind of, blew up a bit, because it was like, yeah, nah, if y'all were to try to leave right now, y'all are going to owe us a lot of money. So, yeah, I don't think the schools are going anywhere anytime soon, not until whatever deal they have expires. Or at least gets down to a number where it's like, you know what, we'll pay the $80 million plus the exit fee and peace out, right? We'll be operating, because technically now they're operating at a loss, but it'll be made up, right? And plus those schools are like, they have money. They have money. So it's not killing them. That's the reason why some schools can do what they do. Mountain West financially does not have, they're in a rough situation because their media rights deal expires 2026. You lost 5 schools. Not only, it's kind of a situation where you need 5 schools to get back to 12. So you're replacing and you're trying to get back to where you were. But then it's almost like you also may need 2 to 4 more to overcompensate. So your conference, which has for the most part been a 12-school conference for the most part, y'all might have to expand it to 14, 16 something schools to try to make up that difference. Because now if you jump to 14 or 16 schools, you can now potentially try to negotiate, fight for a decent media rights deal. But if they just do, okay, well, we lost 5 and we're just going to add 5, that's not going to work out all that well when it comes to media rights negotiations, because the 5 you would have to be adding would need to essentially be equal to the 5 you lost. And Boise State was a huge factor in things. So you're not just going to find a Boise State replacement, right, for that viewership and things of that nature. You're not just going to find a San Diego State and Fresno State replacement when it comes to viewership that easily. That's why they may have to overcompensate. That's why they may have to go pull in a few more than what they're really trying to get. So they might have to hit 14 or 16 schools to ensure that they could get a deal that's potentially paying out 4, 5, 6 mil per school per year. If they can do that, then financially, check the box. But I feel like they're going to kind of have to do that. They got some schools that turn them down. For instance, Texas State turned them down for full membership. They might have to spin the block and push and be like, we are willing to help you make it happen. Right? We get it. You have an 8 mil exit fee. We can give you XYZ to make it happen. That's the thing. Mountain West only has oh so much money to play with. They only have oh so much money in their war chest to make certain things happen. And that's where it gets tough. Because now if you're talking about adding FCS schools, well, FCS schools have to pay, I believe, like 5 mil to jump to the FBS, right? So there's money. There's money that, is at play. There's money that's at play that's needed to make some of these things happen. So it's weird when it comes to the Mountain West, because it's like I want to put the check mark, but I also want to be like, no. It's like that's just more of a question mark. Let's jump to the PAC real quick. The PAC, here's the interesting thing with the PAC. Because the PAC stole the schools they just stole, plus you had Oregon State, plus you had Washington State, and you just added Gonzaga, the PAC, financially, they're getting a check mark. Because the PAC, whatever media rights deal they're about to get, I think they're going to get a very solid deal. They're going to get a pretty solid deal, and they're going to be able to make some moves with that deal. They're going to be able to go and dip into the AAC potentially. Because all you need to snatch other schools, you just need a higher payout than what that conference is paying out. The AAC pays out just about, 7 mil per school per year. If the PAC gets 14 mil, 15 mil, 20 mil per year for their media rights deal, yeah, the AAC just go ahead and say bye-bye to like at least 2 or 3 of your schools. Because Memphis they're taking Memphis, Memphis can't turn that down. You cannot turn it down. You going from 7 mil per school, a 7 mil payout to a 20 mil payout, even a 15 mil pay, you're not saying no. Let's be honest. You're taking that deal. I got a feeling the PAC's in a good spot. So I'm putting a for sure check mark. And then, like I said, from the NIU perspective, the AAC. So let's say the PAC does pull off what I think they're about to pull off, and they start cherry picking AAC schools, then guess what? That's going to create some openings once again in the AAC again. Now the AAC is in a situation where they may have to overcompensate. If the AAC loses, let's say they only lose 2 schools. Let's say they only lose Tulane and Memphis. Let's say that's the damage that's done. It's just Tulane and Memphis. The AAC may still be in a situation where they're like, those were 2 pretty big names. Those were 2 schools that people are watching. Those are 2 schools that are making headlines and things of that nature. Memphis more this year than Tulane. But Tulane is a brand. Tulane, people know Tulane, right? I feel like Tulane was also a front runner to potentially join the Big 12 as well as Memphis. But once the Big 12 went and added these 4 ex-PAC schools, I think it kind of messed up things a bit, because I don't know if the Big 12 is going to still add 2 more schools, or maybe potentially even 4 more schools. Like, you don't want the conference to get that overcrowded. Now you have too many mouths to feed. Now the payout isn't as nice. So some people would object, right? It's going to turn into some objections. If the AAC loses Memphis, I want to say Memphis, Tulane, I don't see Southern Florida. I just don't see Southern Florida. I think Southern Florida is just so far out there. It's weird because I'm like, well, I don't see Southern Florida, but yeah, go ahead and take. Well, see, no, Memphis and Tulane works. I just don't see Southern Florida though. I think the PAC is going to get away from this super far east footprint. I think they're going to get away from it, and they're going to just kind of settle for, like, okay, the furthest we're going to go is Tennessee and Texas and Louisiana. Like, we don't have to be straight up East Coast. I think that's what they're going to do. So what that means, if I'm the PAC, interestingly enough, they may potentially go after Tulane, Memphis, UTSA, and Rice. And they might just be like, yeah, we're good. Why the hell would you take Rice? Because look at where Rice is located. Look, Rice is in Houston, right? Why the hell wouldn't you add the Houston media market to your conference? That'd be crazy not to do that. UTSA, oh, San Antonio. So we got San Antonio, we got Houston. Let's add Memphis and Tulane. We got New Orleans. We got a nice little presence over there now. Right, Texas and Louisiana right next to each other, so that's not an issue. Tennessee ain't that far out the mix. It works. It works pretty well. You also are adding, right? You got Rice. Rice, not the world's greatest football team. I don't even know if they're good at basketball or not. They're probably not. But what they do have is really good baseball. Don't know if that really matters to the PAC, but they got good baseball. We can give Rice that. Rice, historically, good baseball. And they're ranked academically as one of the best. So it does not hurt to kind of add your Stanford replacement. Rice ain't Stanford, but Rice, depending on what we're looking at, depending on the degree, Rice is Stanford. So you trying to get you an engineering degree, Rice is very much an option. Like, Rice is up there. That's a top 5 engineering school. So yeah, like, Rice brings the academics. That would be your brain school, your nerdy school, right? It brings that to the PAC without having to overextend all the way to the East Coast. Now, what does that take away from? That kind of takes away from one of my original thoughts, which was the PAC was going to continue to build out adding basketball schools, which they may still do. But at that point, you don't want to go after UConn again and they just kind of be up there by themselves, right? That would be your furthest east school. At that point, UConn is probably, they're like, nah. Like, we want somebody else at least nearby that we're competing against, you know? So that does create the situation where it's like, well, okay, we got Texas, we got Tennessee, which is also still kind of out there. But like I said, schools aren't really doing divisions anymore. They're doing pods. Well, guess what? You just created something that kind of works. If I can pod these schools together, if I can pod Memphis, Tulane, UTSA, and Rice together, for football at least, right? And they're playing each other, that works. They know that, they now know for sure, like, these are schools you're going to play. And then, yeah, we're going to find, and then there's going to be another 4 you'll play from the conference, you know? But you'll for sure play these 3 every year, and then another 4 from the rest of, you know, or no, let me do the math. I'm doing the math wrong. 3, right? Another 5, I mean. So you'll for sure be playing these 3 and then another 5 that are in the conference, right? And that's going to make up your football schedule. I know with that, funny enough, if they go after those 4 from the AAC, you would actually still need 1 more for football. That's where maybe that's where UConn does still come into play for them, because they're like, well, UConn, we want to add you for full sport, for all sports. Yes, we get it. The closest school to you would be Memphis. But at this point, like, I mean, come on, like, we have either take it or leave it, right? We're trying to build something great here. You know, so that's why potentially UConn can still be a target if they go that route, right? If they go attack the AAC and they take, like I said, Rice, UTSA, Tulane, and Memphis, right? You still want at least 1 more for football. But that opens up the door where, okay, maybe we add 1 school for football only, right? We have a school in the conference that's basically basketball, so maybe we offset that by adding 1 that's football only. That's where NIU they have whatever low percentage chance they have, but it could work out. It could work out. So financially, they definitely get a check mark, like I said, because they have the potential to do some crazy stuff. And lastly, you have the AAC, like I said. If they lose 4 schools, well, now the AAC needs to replace and fill in, more than likely, 4 schools. I don't think they'll go 6. Maybe they will. But like I said, now you're spreading the money thinner. So maybe they just go 4. Maybe they do go 6. The best thing from the NIU perspective, like I was saying, that works for NIU is the AAC has a media rights deal that's locked in until 2031, 2032, something like that. So they would have security in their deal. That's what I'm trying to say. There is security in that deal. There is security in that deal, right? You would know for a fact you're about to get paid out this much money. It would not be a, they gotta renegotiate soon, or their thing's about to expire, or no. You know how much you're about to have coming in. And that makes a huge difference. NIU, in all honesty, if NIU were to actually get an offer from the AAC, right, they lose the 4 schools, but then they add 4 schools, and let's say, right, the AAC got some options. Like, it'd actually be pretty interesting. They would have some options. NIU would actually be able to potentially join the AAC as full members. I know that sounds crazy, because our whole thing, like we said, is travel. You have only typically 6 away football games you have to account for, right? You can do the math on that travel. We know with basketball, it's a bit more. It's a bit more travel. It's a bit more travel. But for basketball, you may not have to charter super huge, like you may not have to charter a super huge plane, right? Your basketball team, we're talking about maybe like 13, 15 players or something like that. 13 or 15 players, coach, assistant coaches, right? I don't think you would need super charter. Like you would not need to charter the same way you're doing for football. It's a less amount of people. So if you know you have $7 million coming in, it could work out. It could work out. I know baseball, that's where some things get rough, right? Baseball, that's where some things get rough. Softball, right? Like things change a bit because it's like you have these sports and guess what? They have a schedule and they got a nice chunk of games they play and people would be traveling all over like for those games as well. That's where it gets rough. But I think the AAC gives NIU a decent-ish chance to potentially go all sports. Maybe football, basketball. And I know, I get it. NIU basketball ain't the greatest. Like, it ain't. Our football team, clearly the more dominant sport. Basketball, not as much. I know women's basketball is decent, but even then it's like, sometimes we can have a promising. I think what we've been plagued by is NIU potential promising season and then injuries hit. And those injuries kill everything. Like those injuries knock out every potential chance we had of having a super solid season. But like I said, the AAC would be the closest we could maybe potentially get to being a full sports-ish member, or maybe not even full sports. Maybe we could join basketball and football, and then everything else we kind of got to figure out a bit. But the money, what I'm saying is financially, the money would be there to figure out that travel. The money would be there to make the travel work. So that's why I'm saying it could potentially be doable. Yeah. It could work out. The AAC could actually work out in that sense. Because like I said, you would not have to go as far, right? Majority of the AAC is pretty much Central Eastern time zone, not Mountain, not Pacific. Is just about Central and Eastern. So if we got to fly all over the Central and Eastern time zone, fine. But it could be doable. If you know you got $7 million coming in, you could now afford that travel. You could. Basketball, I want to say they travel way lighter than football does. So, yeah. Basketball definitely travels way lighter than football does. I think it would be doable, the AAC. I think it would be doable when it comes to what all NIU could actually join for and make happen. I think it could actually work out a lot better because, like I said, the payout, we know what it is. And yeah, so like I said, geographically, MAC works best. The AAC is a close second, but it's kind of like, no, at the same time. Like you would, for the most part, have to charter. You'd have to fly. And then the Mountain West and the PAC, geographically, no. Technically, no. But like I said, when it comes to logistics, which also reaches over into finances a bit, that's where essentially all of these conferences work out, right? We know that the MAC works logistically. If I'm flying to these other AAC schools, those flights aren't long. Like I said, those flights are also doable if you join the Mountain West or join the PAC, because at that point we would be a football only member. So you only really would have to account for 4 away games. That's what makes it doable. And then, like I said, financially, MAC, no. The Mountain West, like I said, they may be in a situation where they need to add a few more schools to overcompensate to ensure a decent media rights deal. And if they can pull that off, then the Mountain West financially, good to go. If not, it gets a little interesting. So they're more of a question mark. The PAC financially, good to go. Like I said, I got a feeling they're going to get a really good deal. I think they're going to get a deal that surpasses the American Athletic Conference. And then, like I said, the dominoes are going to start dominoing, and then we're going to see what happens. And then, like I said, the American Athletic Conference, they're solid. Like I said, their deal is in place. Their deal is in place, and that makes them a very attractive conference to try to get into because their media rights deal is in place and is set. That's what makes it work for them. Now, here's the other interesting thing. I wonder, because I don't know if the AAC has a grant of right type of situation. And if they have a grant of right type of situation, that could be the other reason why a lot of these schools don't want to go. That could be a huge part of why the schools don't want to leave. Because if they end up owing a ton of money and it's like, yo, we owe, right? Like I said, let's say the payout is $7 million. It's 2024. That deal don't expire until 2020, 2032, right? That's potentially 7 years. That's like 49 mil type situation of what they could potentially owe. So that's the reason why if you leave the AAC and there's a grant of rights type of situation, right? If you're leaving the AAC and joining a power conference, you just do it. You do it because you know you're going to make that money back sooner rather than later, right? You pay it and you're like, yo, after 2 seasons, 3 seasons, we'll have like all that money will be back and then some. Like, don't even worry about it. But the PAC, on the other hand, like I said, you got to find out how much money they're going to have coming in before you pull the trigger on something like that. If the PAC finds some way to pull a $20 million media rights deal, now you just got to start doing the math, right? If I leave and we got to pay this grant of rights plus exit fees, how long is it going to take before we're back in the green, right? Because what you're telling me in the PAC is we're getting 20 mil a year. Well, in 3 years, we got 60 mil. Will that just about cover what we've lost? And that probably would be the answer. Like, 20 mil, you owe 49 mil for the grant of rights. I don't know what the exit fee is, but I'm sure that's some little nice number. So essentially you could say, well, in 3 seasons, we could break even and then start, making some good money. Schools would probably take it. They'd probably do it. Like I said, NIU, if they get an offer to join the PAC, I don't think NIU hesitates in the slightest. That's like an automatic. That's an automatic. If NIU gets an invitation to join the PAC, matter of fact, I would try to join as a full member. I would try to join as a full member because, like I said, the money that's about to come in, NIU will be able to afford travel for all sports. It would be a non-issue. It should be a non-issue. If the PAC has some money coming through, if the PAC has 10 mil or more, there's no reason why NIU can't join as a full member. Football only wouldn't matter. We can afford the football. We can afford the football travel. We can afford basketball travel. We can afford baseball travel. We can afford travel. Put us in the good old PAC sport. And then anything else, it gets like wrestling and this and that. right? Maybe that's where it kind of like, well, in wrestling, we're not even in the PAC. We're in like the Big Ten, or maybe we're in the SEC, or we're wherever we are, or maybe, yeah, we join the PAC for wrestling as well, and we make that happen, right? It is what it is. We do what we do. But the money is what makes it happen. If you got that much money coming in, you can now afford to send your teams all over the country. It would not be the end of the world. It would work out pretty decently. So, yeah, I mean, it just all depends. It all depends. Financials, all of those things. It all depends. So, let me know what y'all think about this. Like, comment, subscribe, all those fun things. But definitely let me know, what do y'all think about this? What makes sense? What don't make sense? What do y'all think? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe NIU ain't a good fit in the AAC. Maybe NIU to the PAC should be for football only. Communicate. Let me know. Leave some comments. Peace.